Before we begin, find yourself somewhere comfortable. This is a story told at the pace of starlight, meant for those quiet hours when the day has loosened its grip and the mind is ready to wander without effort. You don't need to concentrate too hard, and you don't need to remember everything that follows. It's perfectly fine to simply listen, to let the words move past you like distant lights seen through a window at night. Take a moment to notice where you are right now. The shape of the room around you, the way your body is resting, the gentle rhythm of your breathing as it comes and goes on its own. There is no need to adjust anything. Wherever you happen to be listening from, this moment is enough. It's a small calm point in a very large universe. Tonight we're not here to rush toward answers or chase dramatic discoveries. We're here to move slowly, to let curiosity soften rather than sharpen, and to explore ideas the way you might explore a quiet place at dusk without a map, without a schedule. The universe has been unfolding for billions of years. It doesn't mind if we take our time. When we talk about space, it's easy to imagine bright stars scattered across a dark sky, or colourful images of galaxies spiralling in slow motion. But before any of that, before names and measurements and instruments, there is simply distance. Vast, patient distance. Space is not just something that contains objects. It is something that separates them, stretches between them, and quietly shapes how we experience everything we observe. Light is our guide through this distance. Every star you've ever seen, every faint glow in the night sky, is light that has travelled to reach you. Sometimes that journey takes a few seconds, sometimes years, sometimes longer than the entire span of human history. When we look outward, we are also looking backward, seeing things not as they are now, but as they were when that light began its long passage through the universe. This idea can feel abstract at first, but it becomes gentler when you sit with it. The night sky is not a single moment frozen in place. It is a layered record of time, with nearer lights arriving quickly and farther ones arriving late, like letters delivered centuries after they were written. And just as with old letters, there is something quietly intimate about receiving them at all. As our tools have grown more sensitive, we've learned that much of the universe does not shine in the way our eyes expect. There are regions where light is faint, stretched thin, or hidden behind clouds of dust. There are places where brightness gives way to warmth, and warmth to motion, and motion to effects we can only infer rather than see directly. These places don't announce themselves. They reveal their presence through influence, through the way they shape everything nearby. This is where our story begins, not with a flash or a spectacle, but with a kind of cosmic subtlety. Somewhere far beyond the familiar neighbourhoods of stars, beyond galaxies that appear as faint smudges even in powerful telescopes, there are regions of space that look empty at first glance. No obvious glow, no clear outline, just darkness set against an even deeper background. And yet, that darkness is anything but empty. Before we name anything, it helps to stay with that feeling for a moment. Darkness in space is not the absence of activity. It is often the presence of something so dense, so influential, that light itself behaves differently nearby. Matter moves in long, patient arcs, time stretches, distance becomes less about how far something is, and more about how long it has been on its way. From where you are now, settled into this quiet moment, it may feel strange to think about objects so distant that their light began travelling before Earth existed, before the sun had fully formed, before there were oceans or continents or anything that could wander about the sky. And yet, those signals arrive here anyway, softly, persistently, carrying information across an expanding universe. There is no urgency in this process. Space does not hurry, and neither do we. Understanding comes gradually, often by noticing patterns rather than grasping details. It's enough to let the scale of it all exist in the background of your thoughts, like a low, steady hum. As we continue, we'll be moving toward one of the most extreme environments known, a place where gravity reshapes the usual rules and where size and influence stretch far beyond everyday intuition. But we don't need to go there all at once. For now, it's enough to recognize that the universe contains regions defined not by what they show us, but by what they do. If at any point your thoughts drift, that's perfectly fine. The universe will still be here when you return, In the next part of our journey, we'll begin to gently approach one of these regions of profound influence, a darkness that quietly shapes everything around it, and start to understand how something unseen can leave such a deep imprint on the cosmos. As we move gently onward from that wide, quiet beginning, it helps to imagine that we are not travelling quickly through space, but simply allowing our attention to drift closer to one particular region of it. Nothing is pulling us forward. There is no destination we need to reach on time. We are just letting curiosity follow its own slow current, the way water finds its path without effort. Earlier, we lingered with the idea that some parts of the universe are defined less by what they show us and more by what they do. This is one of those moments where the idea begins to take shape. Ahead of us is a darkness that is not empty, not passive, and not still, even though it might appear that way at first glance. It is a darkness that bends its surroundings, quietly and persistently, shaping the motion of matter and the passage of time itself. When people hear the words black hole, the mind often reaches for something dramatic, a swirling void, a violent tear in space, or a sudden end. Those images are understandable, but they are also a little too sharp for what we're doing here. A black hole, especially at the scale we're approaching, is less like a sudden event and more like a deep, steady presence. It does not rush. It does not announce itself. It waits, with a patience that makes human timescales feel brief and fleeting. At its heart, a black hole begins with gravity, not gravity as we usually experience it, the gentle pull that keeps us grounded or draws a dropped object toward the floor, but gravity that has grown so strong that it reshapes the space around it. When enough mass is gathered into a small enough region, space curves inward, and everything nearby follows that curve, like water spiralling toward a drain, slow at first, then faster, guided by a shape it cannot see. There is a boundary around every black hole, a kind of quiet threshold where the rules change. This boundary is not a surface you could touch, or a wall you would collide with. It is more like a line drawn in space, a point beyond which turning back is no longer possible. Once something crosses that line, whether it is a particle of dust or a beam of light, it becomes part of the black hole's story in a way we can no longer observe from the outside. What makes this boundary so strange is that it does not announce itself. If you could drift toward it, you would not suddenly feel a jolt or see a sign. From your own perspective, the universe would continue much as before, at least for a while. It is only from far away, from a safe distance, that the effects become apparent. Light slows, motion stretches, time itself begins to behave differently, flowing at a pace that no longer matches the rest of the universe. Most of the black holes we hear about in everyday conversations are born from stars. When a very massive star reaches the end of its life, it can collapse inward under its own weight, compressing its mass into a small region and leaving behind a black hole a few times heavier than our Sun. These are powerful objects, and they are strange enough on their own, but they are not the kind we are easing toward now. The darkness ahead belongs to a different category entirely. It sits at the centre of a distant galaxy, and it outweighs not just stars but billions of them. It did not form in a single dramatic moment. Its growth was slow and layered, built over immense spans of time as gas, dust, and even other black holes gradually joined it. This is what astronomers call a supermassive black hole, though even that name feels almost understated when you consider the scale involved. Instead of thinking of it as a single object, it can be more soothing to think of it as a region, a place where gravity has quietly taken charge. Around it, matter does not fall straight in. It circles, forming a vast glowing structure of gas and dust that moves in long, graceful spirals. As this material drifts closer, it heats up, releasing energy and light, not because the black hole is shining, but because falling inward is an energetic act. This surrounding structure is where much of what we observe actually comes from. The black hole itself remains hidden, defined by absence, but its influence is written clearly into the motion and warmth of what orbits nearby. Light emerges from this region, travels outward, and begins the long journey across space and time, eventually reaching distant telescopes, and much later, reaching us in the form of stories like this one. There is something quietly poetic about that. A place defined by darkness becomes known through light. A region that does not emit becomes visible through the energy released by what approaches it. In this way, black holes are less about destruction and more about transformation. Matter changes form, motion changes pace, energy changes hands. Nothing simply vanishes without leaving a trace. As you sit with this idea, you might notice how different it feels from the way black holes are often portrayed. There is no rushing, no sudden collapse in our telling. There is just a deep well of gravity, steady and enduring, shaping its surroundings the way a stone shapes the flow of a river over many years. The water moves faster in some places, slower in others, but the presence of the stone is felt throughout. This particular darkness we're approaching is known as TON 618. The name itself is plain and unassuming, drawn from a catalogue rather than a myth, and in that plainness there is something fitting. It reminds us that even the most extreme objects in the universe are discovered quietly, recorded carefully and understood slowly piece by piece. TON 618 lives so far away that the light we receive from its surroundings began its journey more than 10 billion years ago. When that light set out, the universe was younger, denser and busier, filled with growing galaxies and abundant material. What we are sensing now is not the present moment of that region, but a memory preserved in motion, carried patiently across an expanding cosmos. This distance adds another layer of calm to the story. Nothing about TON 618 is immediate. Its influence unfolds over enormous scales of space and time. Even its most intense effects take place slowly, measured not in seconds or years, but in millions of years. From our perspective, it is less an event and more a condition, a steady feature of the universe's landscape. As we continue, we will begin to explore what it means for something to be so massive, so influential, that ordinary comparisons start to fall apart. We'll move closer to the idea of scale, not through numbers but through gentle contrasts and familiar anchors, allowing the mind to adjust gradually. For now, it's enough to rest with the image of a deep, patient darkness, shaping everything around it, and to let that sense of quiet gravity carry us forward into the next part of the journey. As we rest with the presence of that deep, patient darkness, another idea begins to surface, slowly and without pressure. It is the idea of size, not the kind you can measure with your hands or compare at a glance, but a scale so far beyond everyday experience that the usual sense of larger and smaller starts to soften around the edges. This is where the mind often feels unsteady, and that's perfectly all right. We don't need to hold everything clearly, we just need to let the feeling of it settle. In ordinary life, size is intuitive. A room is larger than a chair, a building is larger than a room, a mountain feels larger than a city, at least in spirit. These comparisons stack neatly, like stones placed one on top of another, each step upward still within reach of the ground. But when we turn our attention back toward TON 618, the ladder begins to stretch. The rungs move farther apart and the sense of order we rely on starts to loosen. This black hole is not merely heavy in the way a large object is heavy, its mass is immense in a way that changes what mass itself means. We're talking about an object whose weight is measured not against other things nearby, but against entire star systems, against galaxies, against the accumulated matter of billions of suns. Numbers exist for this, of course, but numbers tend to rush ahead of understanding, and tonight we don't need them to lead. Instead, it can be more calming to think in terms of influence. Imagine placing a single stone into still water. Close to the stone, the ripples are tight and fast, overlapping and energetic. Farther out, they spread and slow, becoming gentle curves that eventually blend back into the surface. The stone does not need to move for this to happen. Its presence alone reshapes the water around it. TON 618 is like that, except the water is space itself. Its gravity reaches outward, quietly directing the motion of gas, dust, and even light across a region so large that familiar reference points lose their usefulness. The boundary where escape becomes impossible, the quiet threshold we mentioned earlier, is itself enormous. If you were to place it where our sun now sits, that boundary would stretch far beyond the paths of the outer planets, enclosing what we usually think of as an entire solar system within a single gravitational gesture. And yet, even this does not fully capture the scale, because the black hole's influence does not end at that boundary. Far beyond it, matter still feels the pull, still follows curved paths, still responds to a presence it can never see directly. The glowing disk of material that surrounds TON 618 extends outward like a vast slow whirlpool, heating as it moves, releasing energy that travels across the universe long after the motion that created it has passed. Distance adds another layer to this sense of enormity. TON 618 is not only vast in its own right, it is also unimaginably far away. The light we receive from its surroundings began its journey when the universe itself was young, when galaxies were closer together and the raw materials for growth were abundant. That light has been travelling ever since, stretched gently by the expansion of space, thinning and reddening as the universe grew larger around it. So when we think about size here, we are also thinking about time. The black hole scale is written not just in kilometres or miles, but in billions of years. It is large in duration as much as it is large in mass. It represents an era when growth happened quickly on cosmic scales, when the structures we now see were still finding their shape. This can feel disorienting, and again, that's okay. Our minds are not built to live comfortably at these extremes. We evolved to navigate landscapes we could cross on foot, to track days and seasons, to notice changes that happened within a lifetime. When confronted with something like TON 618, the brain does something sensible. It stops trying to picture it precisely and instead settles for impressions, for moods, for metaphors that feel steadier than exactness. There is also a subtle strangeness in the way black holes combine extremes. TON 618 is influential across an enormous region, yet the mass that creates that influence is thought to be compressed into a space far smaller than any planet, something both vast and compact at once, a presence that fills space by shaping it, not by occupying it in the usual way. This contradiction is part of what makes black holes feel elusive, like trying to imagine a boundary that exists without being made of anything. Language struggles here, and that struggle is a clue. When words start to feel thin, it often means we're approaching the edges of familiar understanding. We use phrases like massive and enormous, but they point more than they describe. They gesture toward a feeling rather than delivering a picture. That feeling, a mix of humility and quiet wonder, is enough for now. Comparisons can help, as long as we treat them gently. The black hole at the centre of our own galaxy, already considered immense, is small by comparison, a quiet neighbour next to a distant colossus. The difference is not just one of degree, but of category. TON 618 lives in a range where growth seems almost excessive, where the usual relationships between a galaxy and its central black hole appear stretched, as if the universe itself was experimenting with how far gravity could be allowed to go. There is no sense of threat in this, at least not from where we are. The distance is too great, the timescales too long. Instead, there is a calming reminder of how layered reality can be. The same universe that holds this extreme object also holds the quiet room you're in now, the steady rhythm of your breathing, the simple comfort of being still. Both exist without contradiction. As we let that settle, it may become easier to accept that not everything needs to be visualized sharply to be meaningful. TON 618 does not need to fit neatly into the mind. It can remain a presence felt more than seen, like a mountain hidden in fog, known by the way it shapes the weather and the flow of rivers long before its outline ever appears. In the next part of our journey, we'll begin to explore how we come to know such distant, hidden things at all, how instruments designed to sense warmth rather than light help us listen to places the eye alone cannot reach. For now, it's enough to rest with this softened sense of scale, to allow the idea of something vast and patient to drift alongside you, without asking it to become clear all at once. After spending time with that softened sense of scale, with the feeling of something vast that resists clear edges, it becomes natural to wonder how we come to know any of this at all, how a place so distant, so dark, and so patient ever enters human awareness. The answer does not arrive suddenly, and it does not come from sharper vision alone. It comes from learning to listen in a different way. For most of human history, the universe revealed itself only through visible light. Stars appeared as points. Planets wandered slowly against the background. Galaxies, when they were finally noticed, looked like faint smudges, their details forever out of reach. Even as telescopes grew larger and more precise, there remained a quiet limitation. Much of the universe does not glow brightly. Much of it is hidden behind dust, cooled by distance, or stretched thin by time. Light, as helpful as it is, can also be blinding. In places like the environment around TON 618, visible light pours out in overwhelming amounts from hot, energetic regions, washing over everything nearby. Subtler structures are drowned out like quiet sounds lost beneath rushing water. To hear more, to sense what lies beneath the glare, a different approach is needed. This is where warmth enters the story. Not warmth as we usually think of it, not heat you can feel on your skin, but the faint, persistent glow of energy carried at longer wavelengths. Everything with temperature, no matter how cold, releases this kind of radiation. Dust grains warmed by distant stars, gas clouds slowly shifting through space. Even regions that appear completely dark to the eye hum softly with thermal motion. Learning to detect that hum required patience. It required instruments designed not to chase brightness, but to notice faint traces, to remain still and sensitive for long stretches of time. Instead of focusing on sharp outlines, these instruments pay attention to gradients, to subtle differences in energy that reveal structure without announcing it loudly. When we turn this way of listening toward a place like TON 618, the picture begins to change. Dust that once acted as a barrier becomes a guide. Instead of blocking our view, it outlines the flow of energy, glowing gently where it absorbs and releases radiation. Regions that once seemed empty begin to show texture and depth, layers of material arranged by gravity and motion over immense spans of time. This shift in perspective is quieter than a revelation, but deeper. It's less like turning on a light in a dark room and more like allowing your eyes to adjust at night, slowly picking up shapes that were always there. The universe doesn't suddenly become clear. It becomes legible in a new language. Around TON 618, this language is written in warmth and movement. The vast disk of material spiraling inward does not shine evenly. Some regions burn hotter, closer to the deep gravitational center, while others cool as they spread outward. Dust farther from the core absorbs energy and re-emits it slowly, like stone warmed by sunlight long after dusk has arrived. By sensing these variations, it becomes possible to trace how far the influence of the black hole reaches, not as a hard boundary, but as a gradual fading. There is something soothing about this way of knowing. It aligns more closely with how understanding unfolds in everyday life. Rarely do we grasp something all at once. More often we notice patterns, then relationships, then subtleties we missed before. The story of TON 618 unfolds in the same way. Not as a single image, but as a layered impression built from patience. This approach also reveals motion where stillness once seemed complete. Gas does not simply sit around the black hole. It drifts, swirls, and sometimes flows outward again, pushed by energy released deep within. These movements leave gentle signatures in the radiation we detect, slight shifts that indicate direction and speed without ever forming a picture you could point to. Motion, heat, and dust together form a kind of map, one that does not rely on edges or surfaces. Instead, it shows relationships, where energy gathers, where it disperses, where gravity dominates, and where it loosens its grip. This map is quieter than a photograph, but in some ways more intimate. It tells a story of balance and exchange rather than shape. There is also an added softness that comes from knowing we are observing the past. The warmth we sense from the dust around TON 618 began its journey when the universe was much younger. The structures we're inferring may have changed since then, shifted, grown, or settled into a different rhythm entirely. What reaches us now is not a snapshot of the present, but a preserved moment, carried gently forward by expanding space. That distance in time adds calm rather than urgency. There is no need to rush to conclusions, no pressure to pin everything down. Understanding here is always provisional, always open to refinement, and that openness is part of its strength. Each new layer of sensitivity doesn't replace what came before, it deepens it. In listening to warmth instead of chasing light, we also encounter a quiet reminder about limits. Even with our most careful instruments, even with years of observation, much remains inferred rather than seen. the black hole itself stays hidden, defined by the way it shapes its surroundings rather than by any direct trace. This is not a failure, it is simply the nature of the thing. There is a gentle parallel here with human experience. Much of what matters most in life is not directly visible. It's sensed through effects, through changes in atmosphere, through the way presence alters a room without saying a word. TON 618 belongs to that category of understanding. It is known by influence, not appearance. As this chapter settles, you may find your thoughts drifting more easily, the details blending into a general feeling of quiet complexity. That's a good place to be. In the next part of our journey, we'll stay with this layered view and begin to explore how this immense system behaves as a whole, not as a single object, but as an ongoing conversation between darkness, matter, and time. With this softer way of seeing now in place, the story naturally widens again, not outward into emptiness, but inward into relationship. What emerges is the sense that TON 618 is not a solitary thing sitting quietly in the dark. It is a system, alive with motion and exchange, shaped by gravity but never frozen by it. Everything around it is in conversation, moving, responding, adjusting over long stretches of time. The deep darkness at the centre remains unchanged in one important way. It does not shine, it does not flicker or pulse, it simply exists, steady and immense, like a weight resting at the bottom of a vast body of water. Around it, however, nothing is still. Matter flows inward along curved paths, forming wide spirals that take thousands, sometimes millions, of years to complete. From a distance, this motion is graceful and calm, like slow currents beneath the surface of a lake. As material drifts closer, those currents tighten, gas clouds compress, friction builds, heat rises, energy is released not all at once but continuously, carried outward in waves and particles that shape the surrounding space. This is where the system breathes, not in sharp bursts, but in long, patient cycles of gathering and release. It can help to imagine this process the way you might imagine water moving through a landscape. Rain falls gently over a wide area, streams form, streams become rivers, rivers converge, moving steadily toward lower ground. Along the way, the water reshapes the terrain, carving channels, smoothing stone, leaving traces of its passage everywhere it flows. The centre does not need to move for this to happen. Its presence alone guides the motion. Around TON 618, the accretion disk plays a similar role. It is not a thin ring, but a thick, turbulent structure made of gas and dust at many temperatures and densities. Some regions glow intensely, others more softly, and some remain hidden behind layers of material that absorb and re-release energy in slower rhythms. This layered complexity is not chaotic. It follows patterns set by gravity, rotation, and time. What makes this system especially interesting is that the flow does not move in only one direction. While much of the material spirals inward, drawn by the deep gravitational pull, some of the energy released pushes outward again. Radiation presses against incoming gas. Heated material expands, winds form, carrying matter away from the centre and back into the wider galaxy. This outward motion is not violent in the way explosions are. It is persistent, like a steady breeze shaping dunes over centuries. Over long periods, it can have a profound effect. Gas that might otherwise cool and form new stars is warmed or displaced. Regions of the galaxy change character, not abruptly, but gradually, guided by the balance between inward pull and outward pressure. In this way, TON 618 does not simply consume, it participates. Its growth is tied to the growth and transformation of its host galaxy, even if that relationship is uneven. In some eras, the black hole may gather material quickly, shining brightly through its surrounding disk. In others, it may settle into a quieter phase, with less material arriving and less energy flowing outward. These shifts take place on timescales so long that they feel almost geological, like the slow movement of continents. Distance makes this even more serene. The light and warmth that reach us from this system left long ago, preserving a moment in its long history. What we are sensing now is one phase among many, a chapter in a story that began before our planet formed and will continue long after. There is no sense of urgency in this. The system does not rush toward an end, it simply evolves. The galaxy around Ton 618 carries the marks of this ongoing exchange. Dust warmed by energy from the centre glows faintly. Gas shows signs of both rotation and outward flow. Some regions appear rich with material, others thinned and altered by long exposure to radiation and motion. This unevenness is part of the pattern. Growth and suppression exist side by side, not as opposites, but as complementary processes. What's striking is how far the influence reaches. The black hole itself occupies a relatively small region, yet its presence shapes conditions across vast distances. This reminds us that power in the universe is not always about direct contact. It often works through gradients, through slow transfers of energy and momentum that add up over time. There is a quiet humility in recognizing this. The same laws that guide these immense systems also operate in much smaller ways closer to home. The slow settling of dust on a shelf, the way warmth spreads through stone after sunset, the gentle pull that keeps the moon circling Earth. Different scales, the same patient principles. As you let this part of the story unfold, you may find that the details begin to blur together, forming a single impression rather than a series of facts, a sense of motion without haste, of power without drama, of change that happens not through sudden events, but through long, steady influence. That is exactly where this chapter is meant to rest. In the final part of our journey, we'll step back once more, not to gather new details, but to reflect on what it means to encounter something so far beyond everyday experience, and how that encounter gently reshapes the way we see both the universe and our place within it. As this long, quiet journey begins to settle, it feels natural to ease our attention back from the immense system we've been holding in mind and let it rest somewhere between the vast and the familiar. After moving through darkness shaped by gravity, through scale that softened our usual sense of size, through warmth and motion and slow exchange, what remains is not a conclusion, but a perspective, a way of seeing that lingers gently without asking anything of you. Ton 618 does not offer a single lesson or a neat message. It doesn't resolve into clarity the way a solved problem does. Instead, it leaves behind a feeling, like standing near a deep body of water at night, aware of its depth without needing to measure it. The black hole remains distant, ancient and unreachable, and yet it has quietly done its work here, stretching the imagination just enough to loosen the edges of everyday concern. One of the quieter realizations that often follows encounters like this is how small urgency becomes when placed beside patience on a cosmic scale. The processes we've been touching on unfold over millions and billions of years. Matter gathers slowly. Energy moves outward in long, steady flows. Galaxies change shape over spans of time so large that beginnings and endings blur into each other. Against that backdrop, the rush we often feel in daily life begins to soften, if only for a moment. This isn't about diminishing the importance of ordinary moments. It's about placing them gently within a wider landscape. The universe does not rush, and yet it continues. It does not hurry toward outcomes, and yet complexity arises everywhere. There is a quiet reassurance in that. It suggests that motion does not need to be frantic to be meaningful, and that stillness does not mean stagnation. Ton 618 also reminds us that understanding does not always come from direct contact. We never see the black hole itself. We know it through influence, through the way it shapes motion, warmth, and structure far beyond its hidden center. In much the same way, many things in life are known not by looking straight at them, but by noticing what changes in their presence. The way a room feels quieter after someone leaves. The way a place carries memory without speaking. There is also comfort in the limits of what we can know, even with our most careful listening, with instruments tuned to the faintest warmth. There are regions that remain beyond reach. Not because we have failed, but because the universe is layered, and some layers are meant to stay partially veiled. Mystery here is not a problem to solve, it is a space to rest within. As our view widens one last time, it's worth noticing how seamlessly the extreme and the ordinary coexist. Somewhere far away, matter spirals around a gravity well so deep that time itself bends. And here, now, breath moves in and out, unremarkable and steady. Both are part of the same fabric. Both follow the same underlying principles. The difference is scale, not kind. If your thoughts have drifted during this story, that's perfectly fine. Drifting is a natural response to ideas this large and this slow. The mind wanders the way water does, finding its own level, pooling where it feels most at ease. You don't need to gather everything back together. Nothing essential has been lost. Ton 618 will continue its quiet work whether we think about it or not. Gas will circle, energy will flow, light and warmth will keep travelling outward, crossing an expanding universe, carrying traces of a time long past. And we, for a brief moment, have simply listened. As this chapter comes to rest, there's no need for a sharp ending. It's enough to let the sense of scale fade gently, like the last glow in the sky after sunset. You can allow your attention to return fully to the space around you, or you can let it drift a little longer, floating somewhere between here and the deep, patient darkness we've been exploring. If sleep is waiting for you, there is no better place to meet it than here, with the universe moving steadily on, asking nothing, offering quiet perspective, and reminding you that it's okay to slow down. As our time together slowly comes to a close, there is no need to gather everything we've explored and hold it tightly. Stories like this aren't meant to be carried away in full. They're meant to pass through gently, like starlight through a window, leaving behind a feeling rather than a list of facts. Somewhere far beyond our sky, TON 618 continues its quiet existence. Matter still drifts inward along patient curves. Energy still moves outward in long, unhurried waves. Light and warmth continue their journey across an expanding universe, carrying traces of a time that came long before us and will stretch far beyond us. None of it depends on our attention. None of it needs an audience. And yet, for a little while, we chose to listen. There is something comforting in that, to know that the universe does not rush, does not demand urgency, does not insist on being understood all at once. It simply unfolds, slowly, relentlessly, calmly. And in doing so, it reminds us that stillness is not emptiness, and darkness is not absence. Often, they are just places where patience lives. If your thoughts wandered during this journey, that was never a mistake. If your eyes grew heavy, that was not something to resist. Sleep and curiosity are not opposites here. They share the same quiet rhythm. The universe doesn't mind if you drift off mid-sentence. The stars will still be there when you return. And if you found this space comforting, or grounding, or simply a gentle way to let the day loosen its hold, you can quietly support this little corner of calm. A soft tap on the like button, a subscription, or sharing this with someone who might need a peaceful night helps keep these stories flowing. There's no pressure, no urgency, just a quiet way of saying that this kind of slow science has a place. For now, there's nothing more you need to do. Let your breathing settle into its own rhythm. Let the room around you fade just a little. Let the weight of the day slip away, the way light fades from the sky without effort. The universe is vast. Time is patient. And tonight, you're allowed to rest inside that knowledge. Good night.